Hello, I'm Lucinda, an arts writer and educator from South Africa. This podcast is an invitation to explore with me the paintings of Mark Rothko, an abstract expressionist and a colour field artist. It's suitable for art enthusiasts, art educators, and students. The information in this podcast is adapted from my work, first published in the Daily Maverick under the title How to Read a Rothko Painting Up Close and Very Personal. I've structured the podcast in two parts. The first part is some background on the artist, and the second part is how to engage with Rothko's paintings. My writing about Rothko is a response to comments like, I don't like Rothko, or I used to love Rothko, but no more. I feel it's a bit like the emperor has no clothes, or I'm a little baffled by the obsession. You can hear from the comments that his paintings generate quite a diverse range of strong reactions of dislike, disillusionment, and sheer incomprehension. And then, of course, there are the Rothkoites, like myself. But it's absolutely pointless to argue about likes and dislikes. For like beliefs, they are subjective and are really best left alone. Bafflement, however, provides a possible doorway to perceptual shifts in how to read and receive Rothko's paintings. Sadly, over the years, Rothko's work has become domesticated and tamed by a plethora of reproductions used for interior decorations. Let's not forget that these are the works by the famous artist for a commission for the Four Seasons restaurant in New York's Seagram building. His intention was twofold. Firstly, it was against the rationality of the architect Mies van der Rohe's building. And secondly, to ruin the appetite of every son of a bitch who ever eats in that room, with paintings that would make those rich bastards feel that they were trapped in a room where all the doors and windows are bricked up. Those are two quotes from him. He was also appalled by the price of a hamburger at the Four Seasons. Rothko was many things. He was an artist, he was an intellectual who was influenced by the writings of Nietzsche, he was an immigrant and a pioneer. Through his ultimate withdrawal from the commission at the Four Seasons, we see Rothko in his role as the son of an outspoken Marxist, an activist and a spokesperson for the poor and the oppressed. Just as Mark Rothko wasn't always called Mark Rothko, he didn't always paint like Mark Rothko either. He was born Markus Yakovlevich Rothkovich to Latvian immigrant parents. And while his early works are seen as reflecting the zeitgeist of his time, they suggest nothing of the seismic shift ahead. And yet, while change may seem sudden, it's often incremental, a long time in the making, until suddenly it becomes apparent. Master photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson writes about the defining moment in photography when elements conspire at the precise moment that the photographer releases the shutter. The result? Something unique and special. For Rothko, his defining moment begins when he moves away from his figurative paintings of subways, hat shops, restaurants, and the architecture of cityscapes, the mythological, the surreal, and the fuzzy-edged multiform abstracts, to the sectional abstracts, or what I like to call feeling fields or color states, which, like the nervous tick of Rothko's psyche, become his well-known signature. Rothko's shift is rooted in both the historical, such as the ancient Roman wall paintings from the Bosco Real in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Pompeian House of the Mysteries, the work of Rembrandt, and the moderns such as Henri Matisse's The Red Studio, and of course, his contemporaries. In her talk, Mark Rothko, The Artist's Reality, for the Boston Museum of Fine Art, academic Elliot Boston Davis pinpoints Rothko's painting titled Through the Window, which is really a self-portrait of the artist with a bright red easel and canvas, as the beginning of Rothko coming into his Rothko-esseness. Davis makes the connection with Through the Window and a small Rembrandt self-portrait titled Artist in his Studio, which shows a stocky Rembrandt at a distance from a large painting on an easel. Rembrandt was one of Rothko's heroes, and he would have had access to both this particular painting and Henri Matisse's seminal The Red Studio, first exhibited in 1949. It's the Red Studio that carries the seeds of something brand new, to be fully realized in Rothko's sectional all-over paintings. Of the painting, he said that the most amazing thing about Matisse's work is that you become absorbed by color. It's a statement that carries the prophetic and not yet conceived color fields. Davis points out that both Rembrandt and Rothko's paintings draw attention to the frame of the painting. It's what the Renaissance polymath Leon Battista Alberti instructed painters to consider: the frame of the painting as an open window. Rothko, however, flips this idea of the open window approach on its head. His work challenges the one-point perspective of the Renaissance, and in its place, there's an absence of any one focus, otherwise known as all-over painting, endemic of the abstract expressionists. This is not, however, for the sake of rebellion, but rather as a vehicle to generate an immersive environment and elicit feeling states in the viewer. Number 9, painted in 1949, and number 10 are regarded as breakthrough paintings, where the artist's past is left firmly behind, and Rothko becomes the painting as we know him. Interestingly, at the time of his color fields, Davis points out that the world of science had turned inward toward discovering the invisible under the microscope. In the same way, Rothko's work was also tuned into the invisible of the inward feeling states, made visible through scale, mark, and color. So this is the first part of my podcast, which deals with the background of Rothko. And now, having explored this, we come to the second part of this podcast: how do you engage with a Rothko painting? Up close and very personal, skin to skin, bareback. There is no way around this. The presence of his work, their fugitive surfaces alive with stains and steeps and bleeds and scrapes, and their structure of colored lozenges with ragged cuticle edges, evade being sealed into prophylactic reproductions. Trust me, I know firsthand. When armed with the blessings of beginner's mind, I first saw my retrospective of Rothko at the Tate Gallery, and I never forgot the experience. What fascinated me was the way each room mirrored the psyche of those in it. Although the atmosphere rooms, which like templates discourage speaking, the body language of the viewers spoke volumes. Those with a sunny disposition congregated in the room of his yellow canvases, the melancholy in the blue room, and the depressed in the aubergine one. To receive Rothko, you have to be still. For Rothko wrote, "Silence is so accurate. Jelly down and just be in the painting's presence and allow." Rothko's massive canvases, some measuring as large as 8 feet by 12 feet, are meant to be experienced viscerally, to be engaged with the whole body, given the sheer physicality expended in creating them. While Rothko understood historically that large paintings were about making grandiose statements, he turns this on its head. Size for him is the antithesis of the grandiose. Instead, he uses it to create intimacy. For him, a small work meant excluding the viewer's experience, whereas a large work meant you are in it. It isn't something you command. And here's another flipped approach. When asked how far back the viewer should interact with the paintings, he said 45 centimeters. Now, that's a very small area for a large canvas. His reasoning was this. This approach allows the viewer an immersive experience, a take-me-to-church experience with our inner worlds. Painting is not about an experience at a remove, but rather it becomes the immediacy of an actual experience. So to successfully read a Rothko, you need to banish the critics and the academics for your response, whom Rothko hated and regarded as parasites. And here's a word of caution from the artists to the color theorists who mistakenly believed that Rothko was one of them. There is no doubt that he was a brilliant colorist, sometimes paralleled with Titian, Giorgione without narrative. But Rothko considered anyone who was moved only by the color relationship in his works to have entirely missed the point of his paintings. In his work, color is a vehicle to give voice to feeling, to elicit a state of being, and to possibly experience what the artist was experiencing or feeling when he was painting them. Rothko's work should be less an optical experience and more an experience of tuning in to one's own inner feeling states. You'll also notice that rather than titling his paintings, Rothko numbers them. This is to encourage a non-prescriptive, open-ended response. They're also unframed, with the intention of eliminating the divide between them and the viewer. Rothko shifts away from the traditional approach of frame and glass, which keeps the viewer at bay. His works seem to move energetically beyond the canvas boundary and occupy the surrounding space. Likewise, he deliberately places them unusually close to the ground, which allows for a much greater immersive and physical engagement for the viewer. Often Rothko's works are exhibited in dimly lit rooms in order to intensify the flicker and flash of canvas surfaces and cut out the white noise. Rothko's paintings pay homage to mystery, introspection, and the solitary. There's something Blakean about them. Rothko is, in a sense, a mystic, like William Blake, who lived not to solve the mysteries, but to revel in it, both wanting to make it on their own terms. Rothko's works hold both an expression of the artist's inner world and the projected feeling responses of the viewer. In the words of his son, psychologist and writer Christopher Rothko, they are an invitation not to step out, but to turn inward. So stop, be still, and allow whatever arises. And you will have begun the process to becoming Rothko literate.